Have a little think back to Easter last year. We weren't going out at all. Last year at our sunrise service, which came from my spare bedroom, we looked at the account of the resurrection in Mark 16. Mark's Gospel, if you remember, finishes abruptly, and there are two alternative endings. But we ended with verse 8 of Mark 16, before those alternative endings, where Jesus tells the women to go and tell the others, but they don't because they are afraid. The story stopped. A pause. A moment to let what had happened really sink in. Last Easter, we were only a few weeks into lockdown. It was all so familiar, so unfamiliar even, and weird. Resurrection Day seemed far away from where we were, and it felt like we were stuck in Holy Saturday. We'd gone into the grave and we weren't able to go out. We perhaps were where those women were in Mark's Gospel, afraid, still letting the reality of what had happened sink in. And in that sermon, I challenge you to think about your role in the story, to consider, as we pause during lockdown, how we might continue, how we might carry on the story of resurrection in our lives and in our community. We clearly got to know about Resurrection Day after the women were afraid because we're here today. But in that moment, those women didn't know what to do. And as we come a year later with this weird way of life going on far longer than we might have ever imagined, what happened last year, what's happened during this period has kind of sunk in. And in that sinking in, we're dealing with all the grief and the trauma and the uncertainty of all that the pandemic has brought, whilst I continue to hang on to hope. And the future is beginning to look brighter. In the last few weeks, the reality of Lent wilderness has been so much more poignant as we continue to wonder and as we continue to wait. But today, reminded again that new life is coming, that new life is already here. When we celebrate Easter, we declare to the world that there is more, that there is better, that there is life in all its fullness. And it's coming not as a result of the roadmap out of lockdown, but as a result of Jesus Christ, who rose from the dead 2,000 years ago. And his message is as real now as it was then. Life doesn't have to be like this. This year, a lot of injustices have been highlighted. Food poverty. Marcus Rashford has been amazing, hasn't he, in tackling that. Racism through the death of George Floyd and everything that came through that, through the Black Lives Matter movement and all of those things. Gender inequality. Women in particular have suffered more from the pandemic than men. Women's safety more recently, as the Women's Safety Walking Home, the death of Sarah Everard, really came into the news. Things like internet poverty. When we've all gone online, some people have struggled. Job instability, and inadequate welfare system. All of these things have been highlighted. But Resurrection Sunday tells us that this is not how it should be. Jesus coming back to life speaks right into the heart of this. Resurrection Sunday is a time for new beginnings. As we continue our story, we begin again. As we step out of lockdown and deal with the fear and the uncertainty of that, we all have the chance to begin again. As individuals, as a church, as society, we need to be asking ourselves today, what are the things we're leaving in the tomb and what are the things we're taking with us? Easter Sunday is the first day of the rest of our lives. After the Sabbath, as Sunday morning was dawning, a new day, a new age was dawning. A dramatic supernatural event happened. God brought life where all seemed to be lost. The resurrection tells us that what seems impossible is possible. It takes things won't change or they won't change out of our vocabulary. Resurrection tells us that all can change. It's an exciting day. As we seek restoration after the strangeness of the last year and a bit, it's an exciting day. Or is it? I wonder if, like the women where the story stopped abruptly in Mark 16, the story of resurrection brings us fear. I wonder if we're more fearful for the future now as we step out of lockdown than we were fearful of going into lockdown just over a year ago. We keep being told everything has changed and things will be different now, but how do we deal with that? How do we work through those fears? Everything has changed. There is a chance for a better and new beginning. How do we approach it? When resurrection is about release of the things we cling on to, that we believe make us us, how can we let go of these things? When we meet Jesus, we are set free. But being set free means us also letting go of those things that we need freedom from. And sometimes we make them part of our identity. As we seek restoration for the future, we are set free from the stuff that has been holding us back. But we need to be prepared to let go of those things that we need freedom from. We can learn something from the characters in the Gospel of Matthew and what they did and didn't deal with on this new day. And it might help us understand our own reactions. We're looking at two sets of characters, the guards and the women, and how they dealt with their fears. So first we have the guards. Their first reaction is to protect themselves from the truth by coming up with lies. Yet there are so many holes in the lies that they can't be anything but lies. If the guards had really been able to sleep at that point and had missed the stealing of the body, they would have been punished. They'd have not been able to get away from that. Not been able to get away with it. That was a crime that wouldn't have been overlooked by the authorities, yet they were fine. Nothing can stop the truth. The truth will always come out. It prevailed despite the guards' deceit. The guards chose not to be a part of the resurrection. They were determined to keep things how they were, and they declared fake news. They didn't embrace the life-changing news of resurrection. They denied it ever happened. We know a lot about fake news, don't we? That's what the guards were into. In our fear for the future, we might be in denial, like the guards. In this chance for a new beginning, we might choose not to recognise that we need a new beginning. We might hope things are going to just fall back to the way things were. The reality, though, is that they won't. And we have to choose whether to hold a strong grip onto what is familiar or let go, and however scared we are, step in to the future. God will continue to be at work in the neighbourhood, whether we choose to be a part of it or not. And we should not, like the guards, protect the past so much that we miss embracing the future. So the women, the first witnesses to what had happened, the unlikely witnesses, they were told there was no need to be afraid because Jesus has risen. Whilst they were afraid, it's clear that the story continued and word got out, as we all know about it today. The truth of the resurrection brings transformation to them. Their mourning is turned into joy, although they were still afraid. Their fear of the unknown, fear of where Jesus might be and what they might find when they get there, is different to the fear of the guards because their hearts are open to change. Their fear is safe because they know that resurrection is true. It's only natural that we're fearful for the future, but we, like the women, can handle that fear differently. In this chance for a new beginning, we begin by recognising that we need a new beginning. The old has gone and new is on the horizon. We choose not to want things to fall back into the way things were, and we embrace whatever happens next. The news is that change is here, that resurrection is a reality, and that there is a future ready and mapped out before us if we're prepared to let God take the heavy burden of what was before away so we can set on a path to the future. God has plans, there is no doubt, and we must not let our fears and our own sense of self-identity get in the way. So resurrection is a springboard to a new life. In its truth, we see a new hope and a new beginning. In the light of the resurrection, we are able to understand what Jesus' death on the cross was all about. It wasn't an ending, it was the way to a new beginning. Our response to the resurrection needs to be one that lives the new life, that believes in the truth. We have been given the opportunity for a new start. Let us take it. Let us take it. Our response to everything changing in the last year is the same. We've been given the chance to rediscover what it means to be a Jesus follower and what it means to be a church in a new landscape. We've been given the opportunity for a new start. So let's take it. Let us take it. Choose to live in the knowledge that the resurrection is true, and choose to live in the knowledge that resurrection is more than a possibility for our community. The account of the resurrection is part of our story. Jesus' death and resurrection is central to our existence as a church, and we choose to carry on the story, making it once again central to our existence and not a bolt-on. New Addington Baptist Church and Community Family Project has Jesus at the centre. Must have Jesus at the centre. There is space in the pandemic pause for our response to this call. We must choose to carry on the story the Jesus way. We are living in the reality of Jesus' resurrection. It gives us chance to step out in faith. Because Jesus is alive, he is risen. Every day can be a day of new beginnings. This new day speaks into our lives every minute, every hour. We must embrace the reality of resurrection. And as we see and experience the reality of post-pandemic resurrection, we must pray and listen to God about how our story will continue. We must not let our fears for the future stop us letting go and stepping out in faith. This story of resurrection is our story, and it's a story we need to tell. It's a story we need to live. It's a story we need to declare as true. In a world that is hostile in many ways to the good news, where the resurrection seems unfeasible and impossible, that need is as huge for us as it was the women and the guards, although they didn't know and didn't want to acknowledge it, on that first Easter day. How are we going to continue the story? To move forward, to move on and embrace the reality of resurrection right now? What new things can we see dawning right now, and are we embracing them? Are we letting go of the old way of life and embracing the new? Because he is risen, we can see possibilities beyond what we can hope for. We see that even in the graveyard, even in 2021, new life is able to rise up and conquer death. We see the possibility of a restored, just and healed world, embracing life in all its fullness. Easter Sunday is the first day of the rest of our lives. Let us embrace it. Jesus is Lord. Amen.